world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Tuesday, January 13th, and recording this a lot later than I would like. Might be the early morning hours of Wednesday the 14th before this gets posted, but I am going to do a daily show, and that's what I said I would do, so that's what I'm going to do. I could have skipped today and went straight into tomorrow, but I think there's going to be enough to talk about that I can actually recover and get back on track when it comes to doing routine shows. Now, first thing I want to talk about before getting into the news, because we got some stuff to talk about with news related. First thing I want to talk about is fuck TikTok. I'm getting a little irritated with TikTok. And for those of you that found me through TikTok, you know I post content almost daily. But I've been having problems with TikTok, and it's not just me. Now, at the time of recording this, I had posted several videos in a row, and maybe not all on the same day, but multiple videos now in a row that I've recorded have gone up, and they have gotten held for review. And which I understand, TikTok's got to worry about their own issues and make sure you meet community standards and guidelines and all of that. I get it to an extent, okay? But at the same point, when they hold my content out for 12 to 14 hours at a time, that is a problem, right? That is very much a problem. And I'm not making hardly any money at this point on TikTok. Okay. Last month, I made a grand total for the month, 21 cents. Going on the month right now from TikTok, I am making a grand total of 3 cents. Not dollars, not 100, 3. 3 pennies. That's it. That's all I've made so far on my videos, on my content. Seems like they are purposely keeping my content from being out there because it is negative to Donald Trump. Now, maybe there's some sort of a connection there. Maybe there's not. I don't know. But it's irritating the hell out of me because I make these videos and I only have about 800 followers over on YouTube, where you're probably seeing this podcast. About 800 followers, okay? Why am I doing the same views or better on YouTube compared to TikTok, where I have 10,000 followers? And 10,000 is not that big of a number, don't get me wrong. Like, I know I'm not a huge creator right now. But at the same point, I hit 10,000, I think it was either in April or May of last year. And I've barely hit 10.8 at this point. They're just not pushing my content. And I'm not the only left-leaning creator that has been talking about this. We have other large creators that have said their videos just get buried. Or, in some cases, in the case of some bigger creators, accounts with millions of followers just disappear. They get permabanned and can't be gotten back on appeal. So I'm getting a little irritated with TikTok. Now, ultimately, TikTok is going to go away. And as I was talking with our friend TJ the Plumber, he said TikTok's probably going to go the way of MySpace, and it probably will. There'll be another app at some point that's going to come along. It's going to be better than TikTok. There's already other alternatives, and maybe it's going back to YouTube. YouTube's doing a lot, putting in a lot of effort when it comes to the shorts. Maybe that's where we end up. There's also Blue Sky. They're doing a TikTok style platform. There's always Clapper, which I quit posting because it was a pain on Clapper. I was gaining some traction. I was gaining some followers over there, but Clapper became a problem, mostly because you'd get a video, 3-minute video, and you'd get 90% of the way through uploading it and it'd fail. You'd start it over and you'd get 90% of the way through and it'd fail. And I just got tired of fighting with Clapper. So I don't know what the answer is going to be, where we end up ultimately, but TikTok better figure its shit out. Because a lot of creators, I think, are going to get pissed if this keeps up. And those aren't the only problems with TikTok. Our friend, the Rational Boomer, was doing a live recently. He's done several, actually, and has problems getting the guests who have requested to join the live to be brought up. Like, TikTok is just saying, yeah, you can see the request, but you're not actually going to get that person to join your live. So there's a lot of problems there when it comes to TikTok, and they're pissing me off. So I wanted to rant a little bit, and also if you haven't been seeing much of my content, that's part of the problem with TikTok is that they're not pushing it, or they're holding my videos out and holding them hostage, basically pending review. Now I've only ever had one strike or warning or anything for any of my videos. And that was one because I used TikTok Studio and not TikTok itself to upload. And it had some kind of a glitch where it wasn't showing me that the one had posted. So I posted it a second time. And because I didn't realize it had completed and it was actually already up, I had accidentally uploaded the same video twice. So they flagged me for being unoriginal, even though it's my own content. I'm sitting here in my living room and we're talking news and politics. But because I had basically reposted my own stuff, they said you weren't original and gave me a warning. So, other than that, I've never lost an appeal. I've never had a video taken down permanently. Nothing. And they're just irritating me all the way around. Now, hopefully, they figure their shit out. And maybe this has something to do with the merge over to whatever new platform, new servers, whatever they're doing behind the scenes because of this merger. I don't know. But still going to keep putting my content out there. And if TikTok continues to be such a problem, I may just have to start recording it and posting it up on YouTube by itself and forgetting the rest and moving on. All right, now let's get into the news and the stories of today. Donald Trump was in Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan, actually, and he was talking at a Ford plant, toured it, and was talking about a lot of things with the economy. Now, one of the things he said was very striking. He was talking about the US Mexico Canada agreement. And if you don't know what the US Mexico Canada agreement is, and you're over a certain age, you may remember NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA was agreed to in the 90s under Bill Clinton. And what was NAFTA? Well, basically, the US, Mexico, and Canada got together and said, for the sake of our three countries and to make things better all around, we are going to agree to put no tariffs on anything going from one of the three countries to the other, even if it means going like from Mexico to Canada through the United States. No tariffs. It was going to be basically free trade. Now, during Donald Trump's first term, he comes out, says how bad NAFTA is. It was a bad deal, never should have been negotiated. And of course, goes with his typical talking points where how Mexico and Canada are taking advantage of us. You know the rhetoric, you know the spiel, because he says it all the time. He never has any new material. Well, he comes out, scraps NAFTA, and at the very end of his term, or toward the end of his term, he negotiated a new version of NAFTA called the US Mexico Canada Agreement. And it is essentially NAFTA. Now there were a few provisions, a couple small things got tweaked, but not enough that it was worth changing the name. But Donald Trump got credit for this big deal, and he kind of liked the idea that it was something he negotiated. The master negotiator that he is. Well, with the U.S. Mexico Canada agreement, he comes out now and says it's a horrible deal. We never should have been in it. We don't need it. I don't know why we would have ever agreed to such a deal. And he's been saying that for a while, completely forgetting the fact that it is his deal. It was his idea. He says we don't need the US Mexico Canada agreement. And he says Canada is taking advantage of us because, well, in Donald Trump's mind, of course they are. Now, I don't know what he means by saying Canada is taking advantage of us, other than what he's probably looking at. And what he looks at with a lot of these countries is trade deficit. And what is a trade deficit? Well, that is the difference between the amount of goods we buy from a particular country versus the amount that they buy from us. Okay. And of course, we're going to have a trade deficit with Canada. Yeah, they got about 60 million people, maybe 70 million, somewhere in that ballpark. We have 330 million plus. There's a lot more of us than there are of them when it comes to US and Canada. So it makes sense. It just makes a lot of sense that there would be a trade deficit. You can't expect that for the Canadians to buy 6 times per person what we're buying. And that's about what it would be. It doesn't make any sense, but in Donald Trump's, dementia-ridden mind, it makes perfect sense. Now, he says we don't need the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement, and he basically wants to get rid of it. Now, it is up for renewal this year because built into the contract was every 6 years it is up for a vote to see whether or not the 3 countries are going to agree to keep it. Now, it sounds like Donald Trump is going to say scrap the works. And that's interesting because, again, it was his deal. Now, what is he going to do? Is he going to scrap the works, come back with a deal that's basically the same thing again, call it something new so he can put his name on it and call himself a hero yet again? What are we going to call it? The Trump US Mexico Canada agreement? And, or just the Trump agreement or something? This is ridiculous. They don't need to scrap NAFTA. They didn't need to scrap NAFTA. They don't need to scrap the US Mexico Canada agreement. We should have free trade between the 3 of us. It makes a lot of sense. But they were talking at Ford and they were talking about auto manufacturing, and that was one of the things Donald Trump was going after. He wants everything made here. Well, cars are assembled here. But one of the things with the US Mexico Canada agreement is that the countries in there, Mexico and Canada, they have factories where they build some of the materials used to make cars. Okay. So they may make the transmissions for vehicles, or maybe even some of the smaller parts, maybe not even the full transmission. Maybe they just make the gears, or they make parts, right, for these cars. And they get made in Mexico or Canada. And then they get shipped in and finally assembled at, say, the Ford plant. Well, Donald Trump wants to do away with any of that, and he wants to go back to full-on American-made cars. But that's impractical, okay, for multiple reasons. One, in the meantime, while you're putting all these tariffs on and fucking around with it, you are driving the costs up. New cars anymore are $50,000 to $60,000. That is outrageously expensive, considering 20 or 30 years ago you could still find a decent house in that price range. I know people who have bought used cars that are only a year or 2 old, who have gotten loans, their car payment is higher than my mortgage because it's such a high value asset and you're taking the loan out for such a short period of time. It's ridiculous, but Donald Trump thinks he's got the plan, and that is to build everything here. What he fails to realize, because he fails to realize a lot of things, is that it takes time to set up that manufacturing. You can't just snap your fingers, and he should know this because he was a real estate guy. You can't just snap your fingers and suddenly you have a plant or a factory. It takes time to build. And then once you get it built, you have to train everybody, you have to staff it, you have to offer competitive wages, and you have to get things rolling. So it would take years to build these factories. You have to get them up, get them trained. First, get them even built, and then by the time it's all said and done, you're talking, 5 years. I don't know. And then, like I said, they have to staff it. This whole idea is dumb, and it's the ravings of somebody who is looking back at history, going, "Yeah, I want to go back to that." He's trying to look backwards, okay, and it's ridiculous. Now, also in this spiel where he was talking to the people at Ford, um, he made a comment about how great it was that the Ford plant had 5,000 open jobs, or that Ford couldn't fill 5,000 jobs. And he said, well, it's great because they're going to soon have these things called robots. Like nobody had ever heard of a robot before. First of all, I think we are years yet away from a practically or a functional robot to the point of doing what Donald Trump thinks they're going to be able to do. I think we're years away from that yet. But Donald Trump is out talking about robots, okay? And says it's great that we have 5,000 jobs that can't be filled. Why? Why is it great? Why does that make America great again? Why is it anything about anything when it comes to Donald Trump? Why is he even talking about robots? I don't know. Maybe because he saw something about Elon Musk and AI robots or something. Who knows? Maybe he saw a sci-fi show on TV. We've had automation in the automotive industry and in factory work in general for decades. And it's not a new phenomenon. But Donald Trump doesn't know that because he's never worked a day in his life. Not really. I mean, I know he was into the real estate markets and things like that, but he hasn't done physically demanding work. He wouldn't know what it meant to be dealing with physically demanding work. He couldn't handle working on an assembly line. But here he is out there talking to Ford, and he's hoping this gets him some positive press. It's not going to work. He's throwing anything and everything at the wall, trying to make things better, and all he does is continue to fuck up because it's what he does. Donald Trump continually fucks up because he doesn't know any better. Okay. So he's at this Ford plant and he's talking, right? Beyond saying that it's good because of robots that they're going to have, 5,000 vacancies and stuff. He was talking about groceries. And he's repeating his typical claim. Oh, grocery prices, oh, they're down, they're down. They're coming down and they're coming down quickly. But they're not. Month over month, they're 0.7% higher. And year over year for December, well, they're at a 3 or 4 year high. It's like almost 3% higher than last year. Grocery prices are continuing to climb, in part because of Donald Trump's tariffs, as he's got tariffs on things we can't produce here, like coffee and other fruits. But I talk about it all the time. I use soda as my example. used to be, not even that long ago, just a few years ago, you could still catch soda on sale almost every week. One of the brands, you could get it 3 or 4 for $10. Still high in my book, but not bad. Now, 20 years ago, of course, you could get it 3 or 4 for 10 on a daily basis, 6 or 7 for 10 on a great sale. But anyway, now it's almost $10 a piece. You went from, in 3 years, being able to get 3 of them for $10 to one. That is outrageous. And grocery prices continue to climb. We got beef prices where it's getting closer and closer to $8 a pound just for ground beef, maybe even 10 in some markets. And Donald Trump wants to come out and say grocery prices are down. Why? Well, because he wants you to believe it. That's the main thing. He keeps saying it because he knows by watching what happened in November when Democrats pretty much wiped the floor with Republicans, that affordability is going to be a big talking point. It is going to be a big issue yet again in this upcoming midterm election. And he wants you to believe that affordability is down. Now, he doesn't have a plan to make anything more affordable, never does. But he figures if he says it long enough and loud enough, people are going to believe him. This whole situation with Donald Trump is ridiculous, and ultimately it's going to fail. Now, come midterms, he's going to get a shell shock when they lose the House of Representatives. And they may even lose the House of Representatives early. Why? Well, there are 213 Democrats, I believe, right now in the House of Representatives. I think it's 213. There's a special election coming up here in a couple of weeks for a seat in Texas. That one is guaranteed to go to a Democrat because it's a runoff election, and both candidates are Democrats. How this runoff works is basically that nobody got over 50% of the vote in the last election back in November, so they go to a runoff where the top two vote getters go head to head, even if they're from the same party. And that's what's happening here. There are going to be no write-ins or anything. One or the other is going to win. So that'll be a Democratic pickup. Then there's a seat open in New Jersey for Mickey Sherrill's seat. Mickey Sherrill becoming the governor of New Jersey. That is also in a safe blue district. Okay, that brings Democrats up to 215. Now there is a seat up in Georgia, the one formerly held by Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, I'm not crazy enough to think that that deep red area could flip blue. However, it's a special election. Anything could happen. And you look at what Afton Bain did in Tennessee, closed a 22 percentage point gap down to just 9. I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene won by more than 13 percentage points. So it's possible. Not saying it's entirely likely, but it's possible. Then there's a seat in California. I do not know what district. And for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the Republican representative who just recently passed away unexpectedly. Well, he just passed. If all 4 of those seats go to Democrats, that would be 217 seats in the House of Representatives. It would take one more Republican flipping, one breaking away, one anything, and the a retirement, somebody else passing away, something. And if the Democrats pick it up, along with those other 4 seats, it's a long outside chance, yes, I know, but they could end up controlling the House of Representatives. Now, what good would that do? Well, controlling the House of Representatives would mean that Democrats could block a lot of what Donald Trump is doing. That would be the beginnings of impeachment investigations. etc., going after people for the things that are going on in this administration. That would be great. Now, those things are going to happen anyway after the Democrats win the midterms, like I think they will. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Republicans after the midterms and after Donald Trump costs them the midterms to where they may have no choice but to walk away from Donald Trump. Now, I talked about impeachment, okay? And I'm not crazy enough to think that impeachment could happen against anybody right now, let alone a Republican in this current Congress. However, there's talk that there's bipartisan support potentially to impeach Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. Why? Because of everything that is going on with ICE. Now, ICE and their actions are reprehensible. They are acting like modern day Gestapo. They are going, in some cases, door to door, trying to intimidate and terrorize people into just giving up. We're seeing videos of them. We saw the video of what happened with Renee Good. There was no reason for her to have been shot. She was laughing, talking, joking, and she was trying to pull away. And the minute she tried to pull away, she gets shot. And this whole situation is now made worse because they are trying to continue this narrative that she was some kind of a domestic terrorist, that she was some kind of a left-wing activist. Okay, and she wasn't. Her ex-husband talks about how she was a stay-at-home mom, was only out because she had just taken her kid to school and was on her way home. That's all she wanted to do was go home. And she gets shot for it. Now, some members of the Republican Party, some members of MAGA are stepping back and going, oh, fuck, what just happened? Because unlike a lot of the people where ICE gets involved or other law enforcement gets involved, she doesn't fit the bill. She is a white member of the community, a white woman. Well, it doesn't look like the people they would normally associate with criminals. Now, they are trying to tie some kind of a criminal record to her, but she doesn't have one. And I think I talked about this on yesterday's podcast. There's some AI videos or AI images going around, which it makes it look like the only publicly available photo is also like she was also wearing the same outfit in her mugshot, which is very, very unlikely if this was a real photo of or a real mugshot. And it gets the birthday wrong and some other identifying things wrong. It's because AI is not that great yet at doing all of those things. But this whole situation is just ICE trying to pressure and get away with doing whatever it is they want to do. And ultimately, I think ICE is going to be held accountable. Now, as I believe it was the district attorney for Minnesota was talking about the ICE agent that was involved in this, even though he is being defended right now by the DOJ, by Donald Trump, by JD Vance, and everybody else. They reminded the public that there is no statute of limitations for a murder charge. So just because the DOJ is not cooperating now, Donald Trump is going to be gone at some point. And when he's gone, there will be answers. There will be consequences for these people for doing all of these reprehensible things. That's just going to be a fact. Now, Donald Trump, as part of this event, I believe, in Michigan. Now, maybe it was at a different event. I'm not sure. he was talking about healthcare. And he said something quite telling. He said later this week they are going to unveil the framework for his healthcare plan. This comes as the 15th deadline is fast approaching. Now, most members of Congress, at least Republicans, have said that they had until about the 15th to fix the ACA subsidies and make it so people can afford their insurance before things got too bad and that they could backdate it to the first of the year and everybody would be okay. Well, 15th is coming up. That's 2 days from now. And Donald Trump has now come out and said, yeah, later this week, we're going to be coming up with our framework of a plan for healthcare, and it's going to make everything so much more affordable. What framework? Why later? This is just like during his first term, where he always said his health care plan was 2 years or 2 weeks away. We heard that for 4 years. They never came forward with a health care plan. And here we are in his second administration, almost a full year in, no new health care plan, and it's still going to only be a framework. What did he say in the debate with Kamala Harris? They had concepts of a plan. Concepts of a plan. And now they have a framework of a plan. That doesn't sound like a very good idea. That doesn't sound like something that's been fleshed out and is ready to roll. And of course, MAGA is going to come into the comments and they're going to say, well, they got to have time to come up with something good, blah, blah, blah. You know, we don't, we're not going to give away everything right off the bat. And we got to, you know, Democrats would have a way of spinning it like what they did. When the Affordable Care Act was being debated, the Republicans were constantly leaking misinformation about everything that was in it, trying to turn the tide of public opinion against the Affordable Care Act. Now, Democrats should do some of the same things because it would work, right? Go ahead and release any misinformation. Problem is, we don't have to. Republicans are doing enough of it on their own by just saying, well, we got a framework of a plan. The problem is they don't have a plan because the Affordable Care Act that they hate so much is based on Romney Care, the health care plan that Mitt Romney put in place when he was governor of Massachusetts. And they don't know how to go about fixing it or anything because it's their plan. It's their idea. So they don't know what to do. And every year that goes by, it becomes more and more favorable. And that's the other problem they have. They want to turn the public sentiment against the Affordable Care Act, and they think by doing things like letting the ACA subsidies expire, that they are going to somehow win this, and people are going to actually believe that it was the ACA's fault or that the ACA is somehow bad in the process, right? And that they think that they're going to get away scot-free and no one's going to put two and two together and go, oh, look, it was the dumb Republicans that caused all of this. People are smarter than that. They understand that it is the Republicans causing their health care to go up, not the ACA by itself. And we weren't asking for new spending. This was continuing current spending. But see, that's the problem here when it comes to Republicans. They miss the point altogether with a lot of things. They think they can just do whatever they want and people are going to buy it. And at one time that worked. But with the younger generations, millennials probably and younger, maybe even some Gen X and younger, a lot of us aren't buying into the Fox News propaganda anymore. Some still are. The deeply entrenched cultists, the ones that would follow Donald Trump off a cliff if he told them to. But a lot of them don't listen to mainstream media. They don't follow Fox News. And they watch other means of getting the information out there. And that's a huge stepping point. That's a huge starting point of getting around the cult. Okay. So we'll have to see what they ultimately do with the Affordable Care Act. I think ultimately the subsidies are going to potentially get passed, maybe not in their current form. I still think 2 years may be the right number, but considering it passed in the House at 3 years, the Senate has yet to take it up. They might, uh, just because that deadline is looming, and they are getting scared about letting them actually completely fail, because they don't want to get completely wiped out in the midterms. Okay. So we'll see where the ACA subsidies end up and things like that. But I think they may come up with something in the next day or two and actually surprise some of us. Now, I want to go back to Donald Trump in Michigan. He was talking about Michigan and everything going on, with he was at Ford, and he was talking about everything going on in Minnesota, specifically in regards to this so-called fraud story. And they're trying to run with this fraud story about uh, daycares committing fraud, and they're acting like it's a new story. Now, I didn't know this before, um, but apparently the fraud story is legit. There was some fraud in Minnesota, but it's not current. It was like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even more, and like 90 people went to prison for it. It was investigated and it was handled and it was done. But they're acting like it is brand new. This breaking news story that it was never investigated, has never happened before, and nobody knew anything about it. Well, that doesn't make any sense, not with the actual facts. But Donald Trump was talking about things like that, and he said that his administration is going to denaturalize any U.S. citizen from any country that has committed fraud on the United States, and we're just going to denaturalize everybody from there. But that's not how denaturalization works. Donald Trump doesn't care how it actually works. This is a good headline for him. This is him being tough, right? He wants to look like the tough guy, and oh, look what I'm doing. I'm kicking people out of the country because they committed fraud. Well, on a singular level, you can do that. On a singular level, you can kick people out for fraud. You prove they defrauded the US government, they can have their citizenship revoked. Okay. What you can't do in any means that I'm aware of is go around saying, well, this whole group defrauded the American people. So the entire group from a specific country, they all get to be denaturalized. That doesn't work that way. This is essentially a similar version of uh, the Muslim bans during COVID all over again. Remember, he tried to ban people from Muslim countries numerous times in numerous ways, and every time the court stepped in and said, no, go fuck yourself. And that's what's going to happen here. This is all about a talking point. He wants to try to go after everybody from a particular group. Now, he, started off with people from Somalia, the Somalis, okay, because of this story about daycares in Minnesota. So he's going to try to say, well, we're revoking the citizenship of all of them. But it's going to go to court. Judges are going to say, no, it doesn't work that way. And he's going to lose, and it's going to work its way to the Supreme Court. Now, how is this Supreme Court going to rule? That's anybody's guess. But the whole thing is, again, Donald Trump just trying to look like the tough guy, like he's doing something, and he's cracking down on immigration and fraud. Even though there's no real proof of the fraud he's claiming, and there's no, then it's not even the right answer, right? This is not how you deal with it. You go after the specific people who are committing the fraud. And that way you could get rid of certain people who have scammed the system. But if we're going after people who scammed the system and who shouldn't have citizenship, well, should we look at Elon Musk, who came over on a student visa? He was over as a student visa, got a job, which you're not allowed to do on a student visa, and then never left, and then got his citizenship. Should we revoke his citizenship? What about Melania? Melania comes over on a genius visa and ends up basically just being a model and then marrying Donald Trump. Seems like she may have lied on her immigration forms too. Does he really want to open that can of worms? No, he probably does because he's not a bright man. Now, Donald Trump was at this event and he was trying to make fun of Joe Biden coughing. And he lets out some weird grunting, moaning noises. If you haven't seen the clip, you should look it up. It is ridiculous. And this is the second time in a couple of days he has done effectively the same thing, making random noises and just seeming really out of touch with what was going on. Now I know he was trying to make fun of Joe Biden in his cough, which that's just the type of person Donald Trump is. And that's why MAGA likes him, is because he doesn't come up with plans, he just attacks and he insults. And that's not the definition of a true leader. But MAGA doesn't care about that any more than they care about making sure people have food, right? Look up this clip of Donald Trump and these noises. It is hilarious to watch this man who is 79 years old, the oldest person to have been elected president, and who we are already talking about his health being so poor. He does these things and he makes these weird grunting and moaning noises. And like, I don't even know what the context was of the one from like 2 days ago, but it makes us wonder what kind of frame of mind he's in, right? He's up middle of the night posting all sorts of stuff to Truth Social, a lot of it not true. Then you have these weird noises. You have the bruising on his hands. You have the fact that he can't walk a straight line. The other day in the Oval Office, he just gets up in the middle of being in the Oval Office, wanders over to the window, and starts talking and babbling about his ballroom. He's not well. And I don't know if these grunts, groans, and moans are a sign that the end is coming, but they can't be good, right? If you're his doctor, you got to be looking at this going, what's wrong with this guy? You know, how much time does he have left? And how do the Republicans keep defending him? Well, they're going to keep defending him until he's gone because they're afraid of him burning down the party on his way out the door. Problem is, what they don't realize is they have effectively burnt the party down for a generation. I think it is going to get bad enough that the Republicans are going to need a generation to rebuild and rebrand to come out of this, especially if the Democrats do a good job of taking care of people on the back end. That's the thing. That's the thing Democrats need to remember going into 2026 and 2028. That they only maintain that level and they only maintain that power if and only if they end up doing good for people, right? They can't come in and just do the bare minimum, reverse a few things Donald Trump did, pass just a couple of bills that don't actually change or affect anything, and go from there. That's not going to work. Okay. Democrats are going to need to put the work in when they get power back. And they need to start by taking control in the midterms. We were talking about it earlier. If they can take the House or the Senate in the midterms, or both, they can do things like public investigations. They can turn the tide of public opinion, but the big thing is they can prevent a lot of things from actually continuing to happen. That's how we make change. That's how we get things done. Now, speaking of change and the new year, I haven't talked about it for a couple of days, but here in Iowa, I'm starting to actually see news reporting and people talking and people grumbling and complaining about the changes to the SNAP program and how it's taking people hours longer to go shop because it's not as easy as it once was to go shop. That stores are having to put up signs that say this item is eligible, this item's not eligible, all kinds of things. It is costing the grocery stores a lot of money to do this, which is a bad move when, especially for the governor, when one of her biggest donors is a grocery chain. But the big thing I think is when people finally get fed up with it, they're going to be looking for someone to blame, and they're not going to buy the bullshit of it being federal Democrats. Republicans are in control here. This is an Iowa exclusive thing. They're going to have to deal with, you know, answering to the voters for it. Now, some of the changes that came about come the first of the year and that people are getting pissed about because now, as they are getting their food stamp money, they're going to the grocery store and they're looking around and they're actually figuring out how bad it is. They're getting pissed, and it's going to continue to keep them pissed, I think, to the midterms. No bakery items. If your grocery store has a bakery, no fresh bakery items. No cold food as far as like if your kitchen has or if your store has a deli and they have prepackaged to-go meals of leftover food. You know, a lot of them do that. Oh, have a meatloaf dinner or a two-piece chicken dinner with a side or whatever. Nope, can't buy any of that on food stamps. No sugar, no soda, no candy, no chips, no tea, baking soda, baking powder, baking chips, gravy mixes. All of those things are out. Sugar flour. So not only can you not go buy cupcakes or buy a cake or whatever for a birthday, you can't make one from scratch. And even if they could still get the sugar, flour, and stuff, one of the problems is a lot of schools do not allow homemade treats anymore. It has to be all brought in prepackaged from a bakery or something if you're bringing treats to school. A lot of districts have implemented those kind of changes. And these things are going to piss people off, right? All of it when you're starting to affect how people can get their food and what people can eat and how long it takes people to shop, it is going to get people up in arms. It's going to get them out at the polls, and they are going to want to vote out the people responsible, and it is going to be Republicans that are held responsible for it. Now, one of the last things I'm going to talk about today is we had a local school board meeting, and because of budget cuts, a lot of programs are getting hit. Now, I don't have any kids at all, so I don't have a dog in the fight, but I'm a property owner. So my property taxes are funding the school. And one of the things that I saw a lot of people talking about, and I think they're actually onto something, is they're cutting they're shrinking like PE classes. I think there's an orchestra director or like an orchestra teacher that's going away. Because I'm not in depth into the school district, I don't know if this is just a deal where they have redundancy positions, like we can actually get away with one position and have somebody else cover more area or one more, have another teacher pick up a little bit of the slack. I don't know. Okay. And there's a few other teachers that are getting cut. But one of the things that everybody was commenting on, and this is where I was going to go with it, is none of the admin positions were cut, right? They kept the admin positions pretty much paid the same. And those admin positions, I think a couple of them even got raises. for next year. So you're telling me your school district is functioning bad enough that you have to start, and it's not bringing in enough money from the community, and your property taxes aren't covering enough, etc., that you have to start cutting programs and eliminating positions to save money because it was for budget, not for cause. But yet you want to keep paying the administration, and you want to keep paying, and maybe even giving them raises. That's typical about what happens even at, in anywhere, right? How many times do they reorganize companies or say, well, we got to do things, we got to cut expenditures, but they cut the people at the bottom of the totem pole. The lower you are on the totem pole, the easier they feel you are to cut. And this is just ridiculous. We need to do better for our schools. One of the things that Democrats need to look into is more federal funding for all schools. I think it should be a thing where access to an education should be maybe not dealt with as far as what gets taught. Well, to some degree, maybe what gets taught should be dealt with on the federal level. But as far as making sure all the schools are funded, there should be some kind of extra federal help to make sure that we are giving our students the best opportunity. Because when we are not giving students good opportunities and we are not teaching them correctly, etc., then you have a whole group of students that grow up not knowing what's entirely going on in the world, and they are left wondering, or they're left being completely in the dark, but they go out into the world thinking they know something, right? That they are smarter than the average bear, whatever analogy you want to use, right? We need to make sure our kids know what's going on, because the number that are graduating, coming out, thinking that they know everything. And I know we all thought that when we were there too. But we need to make sure they're ready for the future, right? We need to make sure that they know how government works and that they understand what's going on in the world. I know it's cliche, but the children are the future. They've got more years left than we do. And that's just a fact. So ultimately, we need to look at redoing some stuff. Maybe, maybe I should get involved with the local community a little more. But from what I saw about going back to schools was that a lot of people were pissed off that the administration was the ones that were safe and they were still getting paid exorbitant salaries. And that's something that really does need to be looked at all across the board, that the people at the top are always the ones making the most money, and the ones at the bottom are always considered expendable. And that goes not just for your local school district or anything, that goes for a lot of employment as well. That the answer always seems to be, well, we can find anybody to do your job. Doesn't matter how trained your position or how skilled your position is, the general consensus, they like to act like they can always find somebody to fill your job. And all while giving the people at the top even more money and extra perks, etc. And that's something that we need to look at and make when it comes down to making things more affordable and making things better for people. All right, so that is going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. Tomorrow is Wednesday. On Wednesday's podcast, I believe, for the Rational Boomer, he did a TikTok live earlier, right before I sat down to record this. And I wasn't there the entirety of the time, but I was there for a little bit. Encourage you to go check out that. And speaking of the Rational Boomer, on Wednesday night, tomorrow night, I am going to sit down with the Rational Boomer, and I think I'm going to end up recording another podcast with him. I do not know if we are going to do a joint recording for both shows again, or if we're just going to record his show. Either way, And then I'm going to still sit down and record it because it's always fun to do. And I believe that is going to be Thursday's podcast. So keep an eye out for that, as that is going to be another great episode of the Rational Boomer podcast, because I always have fun on there and we have a great conversation every time we get together. So that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I hope you have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.